Hello, my name is Justin Mudgett, and I believe the smaller government, the better. Give us our freedoms back.
Hi, I'm Mel Brennan, and I believe government needs to be as massive or as small as it needs to be to deliver fairness and justice.
And I'm your host, Steve Lowe, and this is the experimental podcast where I bring in two guests on opposite sides of an issue, and we come together and have a civil, human-informed conversation. I actually have three goals, and I know they're lofty goals for this, but first, I hope that we can acknowledge the truth on both sides, uncover the nuance between the sides, and most importantly, recover the humanity that we all share. So let's go inside the divide. Justin, Mel, thank you so much for coming inside the divide. I'm super excited about this one. Let's just take a few minutes to introduce yourselves. Mel, let's just start with you. Give us 30 seconds, a minute on who Mel Brennan is.
So, hi, I'm Mel. I'm happy to be here. This is a powerful opportunity. I am the founder and co-founder of Icon Iyali, which is a small group of family businesses that are focused on social goods. My career before that was in the C-suite of a bunch of nonprofits here and around the world. And my claim to fame is that I was the head of special projects for CONCACAF and a delegate to the 2002 World Cup. So.
Sweet. Welcome. Justin, who are you?
Justin Mudgett, Vice President of Mudgett's Auto Body. It's a family business, been in business 45 years. Prior to that, I sold insurance for a Fortune 500 company. I'm also a high school football coach, and I love to hunt and fish.
Nice. Just a quick reminder, we've got three rules here on Inside the Divide. So far, they've been followed pretty well. Be clear, be calm, and be kind. And my theory is if we can do that, we will have a great conversation and reach our goals. So let's jump in and let's talk about government. We've got a guy that says less government, the better. We've got another guy that says just needs to be the right size to do the stuff. So what do you think the fundamental role of government is? Maybe we could start there. Either one of you can jump in.
Federally, state, or local?
Let's go all of them.
Essentially, provide a safe environment for its citizens to exist, secure the border of the jurisdictions, and negotiate trade between different jurisdictions on a local, state, and federal level. That's what I believe the primary role of local, state, and federal government should be.
All right. Mel?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I would add that for me, government is us, right? And so I begin with, there really is no distinction for me in a democratic country between myself and my government, because government is comprised of citizens that sort of move in that Cincinnatus way from their communities. They say, hey, I sort of have a point of view. That point of view gets elected and they go as representatives, and then ostensibly they come back. Now, we've seen a lot of perversion of that with political careerism and everything else, but that's the way it's sort of supposed to work. But I also think that because government is us, it sort of should spring from the interests and hopes and concerns and expectations and aspirations of most people most of the time, while in every instance keeping track of the humanity of the most vulnerable, right? So there's lots of circumstances in our life and times where different groups will impose themselves on other groups. And with each innovation, with each change, with each cultural evolution that we have in the country, we have to have a mechanism that says who's made vulnerable by that, who's left behind by that, who is harmed by that, and how do we mitigate those harms, right? Lots of times we'll say, well, we ought to leave that to charity. We have more charity in the United States than any other OECD nation, right?
And what does OECD stand for?
The organization of We might need our fact checker.
Okay, we
But
can look at that.
essentially, it's Western nations, developed
Okay.
nations. We have a lot of charity, and we still have 22% of kids going to bed hungry every night, right? And so I would like to see government do a better job, but I think their role includes this idea of looking out for the most vulnerable.
And just for clarity, that's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. That's the right OECD?
Yes.
And so that's a sort of a collective, I suppose, of nations. There's 38 members.
Yeah, primarily democracies and market economies, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds fantastic. You jive with that, Justin?
A little bit. In theory, it sounds good. I think true charity, I don't believe government should pick winners and losers. So who qualifies for certain things based on certain things, I think we're all equal. And, in being in business, when you're looking at government contracts or insurances or just, structures of your business and things you need to do, there's, things that I think it should be a fair shake for everybody. I don't think race, religion, gender should matter when you're applying for a government grant or funding. I think it should be on merit based. What do you think?
I think merit plays a role, right? But one of the exercises that I did when I was teaching at Towson was we had all the students come up to the board and write down what they thought comprised the finish line of life, right? The winning. How do you win in life? And there was lots of different answers. And then we had everybody stand in the middle of the room in a line. And then we started to talk about some of the real world statistics that impact lives. And we said, if you grew up in a community that was the upper 1/3 free from crime, take a step forward. If you grew up in the lower 1/3, take a step back. And we'd ask a series of questions like that just reflected what the scholarship tells us we know about these things that impact life chances and opportunity. And at the end of that, we had some people who were already at the board, right? And we had some people who were not at the back of the room, but out in the hallway and down the hall. And so when those conditions exist, everybody doesn't start equal, right? Some people start at the finish line, and some people start way, way back. And I feel like that wasn't their choice, right? Either way.
Now, do you believe that money solves this problem? And I'll use inner city school districts as an example, funding per student, per pupil, versus other counties that have much better statistics and much lower funding. So I struggle to see how money solves this problem.
Well, those questions that we asked those kids weren't just about money. They were about all kinds of resources, right? They were about environment. They were about family. They were about, but I do think that we have a lot of things that seem to be in the way of what I would call common sense, right? What am I prepared to do for my kids? Whatever's required, right?
And
So I will flood my kids with resources.
That's what a great parent would say, and I would say that the breakdown of the nuclear family, for whatever reason, has led to some of those other instances. Been coaching high school football for 20 years, and the program I'm currently with, about 50% of my kids come from broken homes. So you see that how it's harder for them to get to practice. It's harder for them to do anything and everything because they're dealing with one parent or the other parent or just one parent, and it creates a situation where they can't get to practice, they can't get to and from school. There's just situations that broken homes lead to stressful situations for kids trying to participate in athletics or school or extracurricular activities. Money does become a little bit of an issue if you're talking on like travel sports and things of that nature. But if you're talking like public school system, which I coach in the public school system, to me, breakdown of the nuclear family in the last 75 years in this country is hence why we have some of these issues as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the nature of we could spend a lot of time on why families are the way they are,
Yeah.
but the differentiation in family types can be impactful. When I was CEO of the United Way of Southern Maryland, the United Way has a metric called ALICE.
What does that mean?
And so ALICE stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Yet Employed, right? So these are people with jobs, right? And they make up, in Maryland, maybe 35% of families, right? So 1 out of every 3. And when you're ALICE, one thing can put you into a crisis of persistent poverty, right?
Like
You have one car,
yeah, car breaks down,
Car
a
breaks down.
medical issue, a sickness,
right?
a natural disaster,
Yeah.
a tree. One of
Yeah.
my players was homeless for about a year because a tree fell through their house during a storm, and they were, living in and out of hotels and cars. So
Yeah, and these are families with,
Jobs.
and the family unit is intact.
yeah, married mom and dad.
Right.
They just had a natural disaster that displaced them, and living in cars, living in hotels, for about a year till their house got rebuilt because that's what they could afford to do at the time.
Yeah, other people just descend into a cycle of persistent poverty because that crisis was that thing was the one thing keeping them out of that, right? And so, I think that when we talk about government, I want to see government step in with safety nets and opportunities for folks. I lived in Scotland for a couple years, and they were at the time part of the European Union. So they had European Union money for their roads, they had European Union money for their education, and it didn't solve everything. They had to make choices. One of the things they chose was to fully fund their elementary education system, right? Their high school education system, their secondary education system kind of suffered, but their elementary education system was fully funded. What does fully funded mean? Well, my son went to school there. He had 4 legitimate certified teachers in every classroom, right? Those kids were learning, right? He was advantaged from being in that space, right? His growth was accelerated from being in that space. He came back here to Carroll County Public Schools, and the thing that we seem to emphasize more than anything else was getting in line, right? So when he talked about his day, he was quasi-traumatized by the focus on get in line, only 3 seconds at the water fountain. Stuff that in the year before, which was kindergarten over there, they didn't care about any of that.
Was it
about
more
learning.
like creative,
Right.
Structured education instead of
Control,
it's controlled, standardized?
right, and bodily control. There was a lot of focus here on controlling his body, right? Get in line. Well, if we're all in line, I can't see where I'm going. They don't care. It wasn't about whether this was functional. It was about following order, right? Following the rule, right? And so that took some time for him to adjust to, right? But we thought it was instructive, right? When we were here, we had teachers who were known to be great, who were teaching stories like, one story was about the ant and the grasshopper. And I've heard that story told a variety of ways. But the way it was told in his class was when the winter came, the grasshopper said, "Oh, I didn't save enough." And the ant said, "Well, I'm sorry, I have to take care of my family. You're just going to have to suffer." That's the story he came home with. And I went, that's not the story. Because the story as I heard it growing up was, well, we'll help you out. You're going to have to learn, but this is, and we'll take care of you. But we'll help you out, but you have to learn. The story. And I thought that was instructive, right? That we decided to tell a first grader that the story was, if you don't plan well the first winter that comes along, you'll just suffer and die, right? Not every democracy makes the choice to tell their people something like that.
No.
So I worry.
Now, would you? I guess agree with the statement that we're not a democracy; we're a constitutional republic.
A representative republic, yes.
A constitutional republic is
Yeah.
what I mean. That's but I believe we actually are per, the Constitution. Democracy,
What would be the difference in those?
well, a constitutional republic, at least my interpretation, is the separation of powers and we the people, okay? So in a democracy, true democracy, you could have, mob rule at 51-49.
Yeah, I think we all agree that we're not
Theoretically.
a pure democracy.
Right.
Whether
We're a mixture.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering.
And we're not a free market economy either. We're
No.
a mixed economy.
Yeah. We're not
But we teach that.
We're not a capitalistic
Let's
society.
get to that.
We have Medicare, we have Medicaid. That's a form of socialized medicine.
Right.
We have, housing opportunities and things of that nature. So we are subsidizing things. So, we're not a true capitalistic society or a country. And I think
We do give massive primacy to the corporate capitalist form.
yes, and I agree with that, and that's one thing that I ultimately agree or think we need to do a better job of is keep the money in your Carroll County, keep the money in Maryland, keep the money in the United States. There's tons of issues in our country that could be solved, but it really bothers me how much money we send overseas. It doesn't matter where or why, when there's homeless kids, homeless veterans, starving people, people that need help. If think of us as we the people, as a country, as a family. Your brothers and sisters are starving, and you're sending money to somewhere else. I just don't. I don't understand why we do that. At the rate we do that.
We agree on that. I struggle with $9 to $10 trillion in 20 years, because we had to get rid of the Taliban to give it back to the Taliban. That I struggle with that. I took an oath and swore and stood a post. Went to the Air Force Academy at the age of 17, and for me, I also struggle with how we begin and end most conversations with veterans in service. And what's funny is that when you talk to military people, probably half are kind of uncomfortable with everyone going, "Thank you for your service, thank you for your service."
I've heard this, yeah.
And
Does that make you feel uncomfortable, or?
well, yeah, because I was an academy cadet, I didn't really have any service, even though I'm a technical veteran, right?
Okay.
There are people who really gave of themselves.
Sure.
There are people who sat in an office. There's lots of service, right?
Yes.
But I say that to say that more broadly, there's lots of service, right? I value the woman who is in the trenches preventing violence on the corners of Baltimore for 30 years, just as much, if not more, than the private who goes on the battlefield. Both of those serve building a common good, right? So, but I agree with you that we have some outrageous forms of resource deployment in this country. And I would love to see a reexamination of that. And that's why I think about us being a representative republic. That's the sort of the language that I use, is because it is our elected representatives, local to global, that make those decisions. I used to do a experiment called the wallet test. And I would pull out my wallet and I'd say to somebody, "You can have everything that's in my wallet. Don't get excited. It's not a lot." If you can name your elected representatives, local to global, and what they did yesterday. And if you can, I get what's in your wallet.
Nice.
You win every time.
I've never given up my money.
Right.
No one knows, right? And so in a nation where we're free not to vote, right? We don't have an opt-in model like Australia where it's a problem. You must vote, right? We're all free to not vote. We had a 2016 election where 100 million people didn't vote. Bigger group than any group that voted, right? 2020 was 84 million. 2024 was 80 million. In a nation where people do that, you have folks like NPR and Ipsos who ask the question, "Well, why didn't you vote?" And one of the largest reasons was people don't feel like they don't know enough.
Do you know how that compares to other nations from a percentage of population? Like, what is the voter participation? I'm not educated on that in, let's say, Canada or other nations.
I think it's relatively similar to places that have opt-in voting,
Okay.
right? But I think we can afford it the least, right? Because other places also have systems that gird their life and living, right? When we landed in Scotland to live, we hadn't put pound one into their economy, and everybody was covered with everything because they said, as Scots, this is the society we've decided to build. We take care of everyone. When we came back here and landed before I got the job at Towson, no one was covered for anything because we said, you only have value if you work. That's why my insurance follows my work and not my life.
Well,
Right.
that brings up a good point of being somebody that used to, sell group benefits and company benefits.
Yeah.
After re-examining that, I think your retirement and your health insurance should be tied to you, not your employment, because people sometimes stay in bad job situations simply for benefits, or they may not do certain risk or things because of benefits. And I just think that, if you change your job or your company goes bankrupt or you get fired or laid off, it doesn't matter why you lost your employment. I don't think you should lose your benefits. I think you should retain them and, take care of, like Cobra, but never going back on group plans or anything like that.
Well, we first met informally at the chamber lunch that you sponsored. And your kindness was on display there. And your kindness is on display in that comment, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody should have health benefits. But who's going to give it to them if it's not their job, if it's not the government?
That's where I'll go back to the family. Now, I know everybody's not going to have a family, a mom and a dad, brothers, sisters, but I think that's where, as a culture, as a country, we need to get back to, I can even go on a deeper dive in nursing homes. I think nursing homes are not a good thing. I think, you should take, your parents took care of you when you were a child. Then when you get older, you need to take care of your parents, if that makes sense. And then, I'm not going to say, I don't even have kids and I'm not married, but, I've been coaching football, so I've dealt with thousands of kids over, 20 years. And, the ones that come from more stable homes tend to be more stable, meaning participation grades, all those things tend to be, go to the workforce sooner, to college sooner. It's an easier path. Just like you mentioned in the beginning, like the steps forward and steps backwards. And I feel that if we were to focus on that as a culture, like the Scots focused on providing health insurance and benefits, that was important to them. If we focused on taking care of our family and building families, as opposed to maybe trying to make as much money in the world as possible, or as opposed to everybody buy your own house. It's the American dream, as opposed to you could potentially buy 20 acres and then your whole brothers, sisters, families could grow up there. You could, have your own food, chickens, whatever, become more self-sustaining, self-reliable. I think for young kids that creates accountability and responsibility. It's a good way to teach them, especially if you get farm animals. It's important to teach them daily responsibilities because as we get older, it doesn't matter what we do for work or what we do for a living or what we do to make money. You got to be accountable and responsible to your employer, or if you're self-employed, to yourself, all those things. And I just feel, COVID, I feel, really broke the backbone of the work ethic that I felt that America had that was hanging on, because it became a situation where for about 2 years you could maintain your lifestyle without working. And that created, it takes 21 days to make a habit. So you get people used to not being accountable, not being responsible to take care of themselves, then eventually they're going to become reliant on somebody else. It's similar to, like, you see the sign at, like Yellowstone National Park. It says, please don't feed the animals, otherwise they'll not know how to fend for themselves and feed for themselves. So if you just keep giving people things over, I think, time, they don't appreciate it. They don't. They're just not appreciative of free things. And the best example, not a free thing, but like a rental car, right? You've probably rented cars in your life. You probably own cars in your life. I've rented cars. I own cars. You don't care as much about the rental car as you do as your own car, because you don't own it. It's not yours. You're not accountable to it. You're not, paying for it every month. So I just feel that, we have to get back to the basics. Family dinners, around the dinner table. Put your cell phones away. Don't watch TV. Be human. interact, build bonds, build relationships. I feel that, like I said, COVID broke those kids' social interactions. So these are the COVID kids now, like they were 8th grade. So now when I'm coaching them, they're seniors in 2025, and they, after doing this for 2 decades, they have almost no social skills that compared to kids in 2019 had for communication. So we have team dinners before our games, and I literally collect all their cell phones and I set them in a box. And I tell them that tomorrow when we're playing, you can't text your buddy, you can't Snapchat your buddy. You're gonna have to communicate on the field, or use hand signals or whatever. And I think we need to bring back communication, family, and instead of trying to grow and build as much as possible, like be grateful for what you do have. Don't be jealous. Don't be envious. And I think that as a cultural shift would help alleviate some of these issues.
Yeah, you said a lot there. Where you started, you and I are almost 100% aligned in terms of the idea of intergenerational wealth, and not just money, but like the benefit you get from being around your grandparents, the benefit you get from being around your in-laws. And particularly in the United States, where people's major asset is their home, I've got a big problem with that home's wealth being extracted to some nursing home, as opposed to having my parents with me. Or, I live with my father-in-law. He grew up with his grandparents in his house in Baltimore. And then when you talked about the idea of a family compound, and the opportunities that can happen there, that's sort of our vision. So we're sort of like 100% aligned in that idea.
How we get there is probably different.
Right. Yeah.
Or if we even can.
Well, and everybody can't have 20 acres, right? Of arable land. So, there are different ways to make that manifest. But the idea of, does everybody on the street that you live on, does everybody need their own snowblower? Does everybody need their own lawnmower? Or does the community get a lawnmower and you teach kids how to mow lawns, right? This thing happened, I think, post-World War II, right? When we went from a war economy that didn't want to go back into the depression that it was in beforehand, and instead turn that into a consumer economy, right? And the broad explosion of suburbia functioned as a result, right? I grew up in a Levittown, right? It's called Willingboro, New Jersey, but it's Levittown, New Jersey, right? The first one was out on Long Island. The second one was in Pennsylvania.
It's Levittown?
Yeah.
What is that?
The Levittown model,
Okay.
William Levitt. And so this is a guy who created essentially assembly line cookie cutter homes, 5 or 6 types for returning GIs. And he wouldn't sell to black people, right? He refused to sell to black people. He said, if I sell to one black person, the white purchasers have told me they're going to leave and they won't purchase homes. And so black people didn't get into those communities until other people, mainly Jewish people, resold to them because he couldn't control resale, right? And my parents, once the Housing Act government made a decision in Jersey that we weren't going to have fairness and not arbitrary discrimination.
What year was that?
1969. My parents moved into Levittown. My dad walked through the frames of the house to show my mom. They were coming from Philadelphia, and this is South Jersey. And he showed her the house. They walked around the house property. They left. And then the neighbors that were already there had people knock on their door and said, there's a Negro family about to move in. What are we going to do about it? He didn't find that out until maybe 7 to 9 years later when he played softball. Talking about community building. He played softball with those same neighbors who were like, well, when you first came. Right? But I say all that to say that.
Now, do you think that might have been propaganda and fear created by government to divide race potentially?
Well,
for
yeah,
example,
I would argue that it's probably mostly those who have.
what about Reefer Madness, the documentary? Are you familiar with the?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, like I think that's trash. Like,
Yeah, though the whole war on drugs, I would argue, is
yeah,
trash.
I agree with that.
Right.
The crack cocaine difference between jail sentences for
Yeah.
powder cocaine versus crack cocaine in the '90s.
Yeah,
That's trash.
yeah, exactly.
But that's government,
Yeah,
almost picking which communities are going to face harsher penalties, and that's again, equal. Like, coke is crack, crack is coke, same penalty.
if your argument includes the idea that government, and I put it in quotes because again, government is us. Government is human beings either saying yes, no, or maybe so, right, to a policy or procedure. If it includes them making bad decisions that harm people sometimes, I absolutely agree with that, right? And it wasn't government; it was bankers and it was
Yes.
elitists in communities that redlined communities,
Yes.
right? That drew lines around communities and said, "We won't sell to black people anywhere but here," right? And that, post World War II to today has produced massive differences in wealth. The Selig Center out of the University of Georgia talks about the purchasing power by race, right? Purchasing power by race, black people have 1/10 the purchasing power of others. And it's not because of the broken down family, right? There are similar models of family breakdown across race. It comes down to resources, right? It is because there was a decision to keep, if most wealth is generated through the asset of your home, right, and you keep people in places where they can't generate that resource, they don't have wealth that they can pass down, right? And so I grew up in a community that was relatively mixed, right? So I saw some people who were able to hold on to their home and pass that wealth down and extract wealth for people to go to college, and other people who weren't, other people who lived and rented and did other things. So I think part of what I would say is I would go all the way back and just exploring some of what you said, and offer this theory of the case. My theory of the case is that a lot of our issue around government, around culture, comes from the fact that we lack language to describe our reality, and our reality is actually interdependent.
What do you mean language we lack? Like,
So
who is us in that?
most of us.
Okay.
Most of us. Our reality is interdependent, right? But we sort of bucket it into either independence or dependence, right? We're very binary in the United States. It's independence or dependence, when actually most things are some mix of dependent independence or independent dependence, depending, right? Almost everything is actually, right? So there are no self-made men ever in history. Everyone has had help. And when you examine everyone's story, at some point they go, well, I was able to, wait a minute, how'd you do that? Oh, my uncle. That's what I mean, is that people never tell that part of the story. Bill Gates, self-made man. No, he wasn't. His mother was on the board of a variety of computer companies and the University of Washington, which gave him special access to the University of Washington Computer Center, where he was able to learn things earlier on than everybody else. Now, that combined with his individual skill and will, that also exists, right? But it doesn't exist in isolation. So when we start thinking about these problems, we need new language, new grammar, new vocabulary, new landscapes to talk about the idea of being both 100% dependent on each other and free to make our own decisions. And we don't have that. We can't do that in an and format. We can only do it one way or the other, right? And that's part of our struggle, I believe, right? Because let's just imagine the perfect individualist, big sky, Montana. I'm off in a cabin doing my own thing, and I am totally self-sufficient. But President Putin or President Xi decides to lose their mind and launch nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. I am 100% dependent on sanity in these other countries. Doesn't matter how independent I feel, right?
Yeah.
If upstream in Canada, where I get my water from, They deregulate, and companies now throw toxic waste into the water. Doesn't matter how independent I feel, right? I am dependent upon their decisions, right? I'm dependent upon others. So I use that big example to make the smaller point that I would argue that that's happening in little ways all the time, every day, 1,000 different ways. We are interdependent. And so we need, I think, an expression of government that sort of reflects that. We need a declaration of interdependence, not just independence, right? We are not these isolated, singular human beings alone. We're part that, but we're also partly 100% dependent on each other. Now, we sort of try to get at that in different ways, right? We start the declaration with the preamble to the Constitution with "We the people," right? We do start there, right? But when you talk about how we build systems as if that interdependence doesn't even exist, right? A great example is Baltimore, and I'll finish with this. Baltimore is an independent city, and there's only 2 in the country, right? An independent city. Baltimore and St. Louis are the only independent cities in the country. Well, there's 45 small village examples in Virginia, but we're not talking about those. We're talking about major cities.
I'm not familiar with that classification.
Yeah,
It's
define
a
it.
city where the city is not also the county. So in Philadelphia, Philadelphia is the city of Philadelphia and Philadelphia County. You can't move to the county in Philadelphia and not pay taxes to the city, to the urban core that occupies the most important land and the port that makes that region important,
Okay.
right? In Baltimore, it's an independent city where the city is not the county, right? And so people can get their job from Baltimore. They can get their food from Baltimore. They can get their culture from Baltimore. They can go to concerts in Baltimore and pay no taxes to Baltimore. Only 2 cities in the country are like that, Baltimore and St. Louis. So some of the issues we see in Baltimore and St. Louis come from the fact that you have somebody who can get everything that produces everything for their family from Baltimore and pay no taxes to Baltimore, right? And so, and you should have your fact checker bring that up because
Sure, yeah,
it's
sure.
it's a huge point. And so when you realize that about Baltimore, you go, oh, this is an administration that continues to do more with less, right? Because I've got 580,000 people or whatever it is. I've got to get up the snow and I've got to get up the trash. That costs X, right? Well, somebody decides they don't want to pay X. They're mad at that. They leave. I've still got to pay X, but now I've got a lower tax base. But I still got to get up all the trash and the snow,
Yeah,
right?
and I believe Baltimore's population 20, 30 years ago, and I could be incorrect, was maybe 750,000 people.
Yeah.
Now it's, below 600,000, so there goes, a third of your tax base.
Right. And then they go to Baltimore County, right, which is a bunch of what they call census designated places, right? Owings Mills. And the county executive there is probably the most powerful county executive in the country because he's got a lot of little small locations that don't have their own public education, right? And it's really a county-based police force, right? So you have this huge set of resources for the county executive, but nowhere else in the country does it function like that, except for St. Louis. Most places, the city is also the county.
Now,
So-
were other cities set up as independent like Baltimore and St. Louis historically in the past, or?
Yeah, and they manage the growth by managing that process, right? And, we had Stephanie Rawlings Blake, whose father was Pete Rawlings. He used to be one of the people that was able to go to Annapolis and bring back large swaths of state money for Baltimore to counter this force. But as he passed away and moved on, and as the growth of places like Montgomery County took over, it's Montgomery County and counties like that are getting the vast majority of resources from Annapolis. And so now you have Baltimore as this independent city that has to figure out a new way to go forward in some of these areas, right? And so I would want to examine the thing that you started with, which is the cost per pupil piece, right? I used to work for a cutting edge nonprofit called Thread, which was getting incredible results for young people. It was focused on if you are, and I got to stop talking, but it was focused on, God bless you, kids who had performed in the bottom 25% their first semester in high school in Baltimore City public schools, right? Because if you perform in the bottom 25%, you graduated from Baltimore City Public Schools at a rate of 4% in 2012 to 2015, right? So 96% of those kids were left behind and didn't graduate at all. Thread snatched those kids up and graduated them at a rate of 86%. Right?
What was the difference?
They wrapped around those kids with resources and did whatever it took for 10 years, just like we would for our kids, right? So once the decision was made to do whatever was required to care for somebody, they got the same outcomes as other kids.
And I kind of feel like in private small business, that's the same mentality. It's whatever it takes to succeed. We got to make payroll. We got to pay the mortgage. Whatever, just like a family has to buy groceries, utilities, pay rent, pay mortgage. It's whatever it takes.
Right.
And then like I said, not working in the public sector, but coaching football, I see just a different mentality of. I'm not going to say fraud, waste, and abuse of resources, but just a different mentality of money that wasn't generated by that family or that business or that employee. I waste for sure in the public school system across the state. I see tons of waste that if it was a private school, you'd never see that because that's actual money for whoever owns that private school, or a donor would see it and he'd be like, well, there's $10,000 laying in here. Like, you have equipment getting ruined. So I feel that, my biggest issue with nonprofits is there's nothing wrong with nonprofits. The problem with nonprofits are if I wanted to do something to help my community, I'm forced to start a nonprofit. I'm forced to then file another set of accountants and lawyers and start an LLC or a 503 or whatever the nonprofit structures may be. I know there's various forms. Because we like to help our community. We had a benefit dinner for my father who passed away. We donated the proceeds to the Tech Center of Carroll County. We've been sponsoring tons of community events and things for 45 years. However, it's not tax advantageous for us to do that as a for-profit company versus doing it as a nonprofit company. And I just don't think I should be forced to start a whole nother entity to do charitable work. I think I'm almost at the point where I don't think nonprofits should exist. Not that the nonprofit itself is the problem. I just think again, I guess I'm going with more like equality. Like, you start a business, and if you want to be charitable and help people, like just like the same things you do with your nonprofits, but they would be for profits, and then people would then have the ability to pick and choose to do business with your nonprofit, to donate to your nonprofit. And then if they feel that you're, not doing a good job for the community or spending too much money on yourself and not reinvesting it, then they have the option not to continue to do business with you instead of charity with you. So that's my struggle with nonprofits is, we've actually created a nonprofit called Mudgett to continue to give money to our community. So I'm not against nonprofits. I'm against government telling me I have to buy all this stuff, pay more people to file different tax forms and do all this stuff to continue to help people. That I don't need an entity to tell me it's a good thing to help people. I don't need government. I think that's more morality and value. I don't need government to tell me I need to help my neighbor. So I guess that's my issue with nonprofits. It's cost prohibitive to me. I can donate less money because it costs me more money to do a nonprofit, if that makes any sense. And there's time and money instead of, I can give more time to kids or I could give more money to other charitable causes, but I have to spend time and money managing a whole other entity. So I just don't agree with that.
Yeah, we probably agree that over the long term, I don't think there should be many nonprofits either.
Wow.
But I think for a different reason, right? When you look at the Y movement across the world,
Why?
the YMCA,
Okay.
The Y movement doesn't do the same things in other parts of the world that they do here because they don't have to, right? Because the government and the set of decision rules that builds the nation does what the Y does. So the Y does other things, right? But they don't do what they do here, right? Because the country does that,
Now, are you familiar with when JFK did the militant workout programs for the public school system?
The president's physical fitness challenge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So-
grew up with that.
Okay, yeah. I'm not 38, so I wasn't around then. Yeah, so that fitness challenge, so that was a directive, and, whether you could say we're doing it to go to war, prepare the men, it doesn't matter why. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, I don't know the statistics, but people got healthier, they got in better shape, they became stronger, they became more self-confident, they had more abilities, and, now, kids can sit at a gym class, if they don't feel like doing gym class. Kids can opt out of whatever they want and just do whatever they want. There's no, and again, and I'm speaking from my experiences in my 20 years in the public school system, I just don't think they should be allowed to skip gym class. Like, I mean, that health is wealth, doesn't matter how much money you have in the world, ask Steve Jobs. Can't save your life sometimes. Mm-hmm. So health is the ultimate wealth. Mm-hmm. And, dietary things with public schools that I don't agree with, dietary things from, government I don't agree with, of what it will pay for, what it won't pay for, if you're on, assistance of certain things. And then, going back to housing, like, if a good person owns the property and it's, assisted either by nonprofits or, government assistance, it'll be a good situation for the tenant. If it's a slumlord, it doesn't matter if it's Section 8, for-profit, nonprofit, it's going to be a bad experience for the tenant. Mm-hmm. So again, like, I don't think government can make you a good or bad person. I think that's derived from other things.
No, but I think government can protect you from the worst excesses of bad people, right?
Do you agree with that?
Yes and no. I guess it depends on the situation.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah, like, because if, for example, in New York recently, there was an incident in, Manhattan, and there was security, it's the NFL building, blah, 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 and government couldn't protect people, even though there was government in place, security-wise, and off-duty people to protect people. But, for free will or for whatever reason, people made terrible decisions, and that happened. But I don't think government can stop evil.
Oh, I definitely think it can. I think in 1966, Maryland was one of the states where I couldn't marry my wife. That was evil.
Well,
and that
it can't stop all evil.
No.
Yes.
I agree with that.
It can stop certain evil practices and policies,
Yeah.
but not...
Especially systems.
Yes.
Yeah, especially systems.
So I'm interested, though, because clearly there are some examples, just like you just mentioned in Maryland and the in that time, the illegality of interracial marriage. And I think, I don't know, I'm sitting here thinking, glad we've straightened that one out. But I tend to think I would like less government. But then you look at things like that, and it's like, well, maybe the government should be solving and protecting against these evils.
Yeah.
And I think, Justin, you're probably like, as you even said, less government, the better. So what can we do about this? Like, what?
I mean, so that's where it gets getting hairy. So is marriage something between you and your partner that's spiritual, faith-based? And, I struggle with the fact that when you get married to somebody legally in the United States, you're essentially forming a business partnership.
Contract, yeah.
Because now you're filing taxes together. So to me, marriage and getting married and recognized by the government can almost be two different things. Mm-hmm. I understand you need to be legally married, and I think the government...
Well, you don't need to be, but
no.
There are advantages.
There's certain advantages of being
But
legal.
perhaps there shouldn't be. Is that kind of what you're getting at, that the government should stay out of that as well?
Well, I just don't think that government can't... A piece of paper doesn't define love, like marriage. Like, I understand what you're saying and where you're coming from, but did the government changing the laws change the love for your wife?
No, I think that I think that government created the conditions where that love could flourish.
Okay.
Right. We may not have even met, right, in 1966 because the conditions might have been such that we may not have even come across each other. There might have been physical jeopardy or a chilling effect in us connecting in 1966 in Maryland. The it comes back to there's an opportunity when we come together and say broadly what we'll accept and what we won't accept to protect vulnerable people, right? We in the United States after the Civil War all the way up 100 years, right, of American terrorism and lynching, which was called Jim Crow, right? That was systemic, right? And everybody left to their own devices, we might still have some of that. And there are some communities where there still is some of that.
There's
Right,
that
but there's a lot of legal recourse now.
globally every day.
Yeah, there's colorism and racism everywhere, but there are places where there are less or more legal recourses to respond to that. And if I'm a bad actor, but I know that everyday people have gotten together to generate laws and policies that'll punish me for my bad acting if I get caught, that might be a deterrent for lots of people.
No, I'm sure you're probably familiar with Charlestown in the late 1890s, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm sure you're well aware of those things. So, wasn't it government that destroyed them?
The Tulsa race riots?
Well, just in general, Black Wall Street, super successful black majority areas at the turn of the 19th century. My understanding of it was on election days, they marched in and basically stole the elections by killing people. And they were Democrats, and they used the KKK to help them. So that's my understanding, and specifically Charleston, of what happened there. And then the Tulsa race riots and things of that nature. So that's people acting in bad faith for power, money, control via government, via elections. So that to me is where I'm not a big government person. It would have been really beneficial to society if government would have stepped in at that time and addressed those issues that were occurring, murder, things of that nature.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to me how, there is evil, there is good. For example, slavery has always been immoral and unethical. It's been legal for a very long period of time in human history. That never made it okay. So as power changes, laws change. You can look back at World War I, World War II, more recently in the Middle East, as powers change, then different factions of people rise up or become suppressed or oppressed, and things change all the time globally due to elections and politics. And it's like any tool. Politics and government can be a weapon, and it can be a weapon to save lives, or it can be a weapon to take lives. And that gets me back to my ultimate theory of less is more. So the smaller the government is from a global, federal, state, and local level, in theory, everybody else should have more to decide what they do with whatever they do have. For example, property taxes. Certain states don't have it. Other states don't have income taxes. So how is it that certain states are able to function without having property taxes? And what other taxes do they have to replace that? Like in Pennsylvania, there's townships and boroughs and things of that nature. So how are some jurisdictions able to function without tons of help? And that's just a question I don't really know the answer to, but there's tons of reasons, and we could sit here for 12 hours and talk about every single one in every single community, why it's more or less successful. But overall, I just think if there's evil, then government could potentially help stop that through laws and elections and getting people voted in that are going to do the right thing. But then it always comes back to the money again. So look at how much money politicians raise and campaign on, as opposed to what if all that money went to even a nonprofit to feed homeless people, help people, get people educated, the THREAD program in Baltimore. What if that money was not needed to win elections? What if that money was not needed to pay for, I don't know, like exorbitant government spending? And, again, you can name a million things, like Trump's new golf cart, like I'm sure the bill on that was like $500,000.
Or the V-22 Osprey.
Okay, yeah, military stuff, and then like at the same time, like we're making all this money, and we're feeding the industrial military.
You're going to get comments from V-22 Osprey pilots who are mad at me.
Is that a plane that?
It's a VTOL.
Okay.
It takes off like a helicopter, then flies like a
Okay, yeah, those are really cool.
Yeah, but it was a mess.
It didn't work right,
Yeah,
right?
for a long time.
They kept crashing, and they had a high failure rate.
Right.
And I have no idea how much money we spent on that.
Right.
But billions.
Lots.
Yeah. So, I agree we need strength and power of our military to protect our citizens, but then at the same time, like, should we be paying to be the world police? Like we have been with NATO and things of that nature. No, I don't think we should. I think, if you don't want to build your own military to protect yourself, just like some people hire private security, you can have the American military protect your assets if that's what you want and you pay for it. I just don't think that my tax dollar should be protecting France and France not paying for that.
Yeah, I agree. And France pays. The vast majority of our money doesn't go to NATO, and even the stuff we do outside the country. The vast majority of our money in the military goes really into, when we have 700 bases around the world, but mainly it's platforms like submarines and submarine-launched ballistic missile platforms. Right, that's really where our money goes. But, I'll say this: you made a reasonable argument for small government. I'll make an argument for what I see. Right, when people measure happiness, the Nordic countries are among the happiest, and I don't think they have less evil people in Sweden. I think we have the same percentage of evil people, right, all over the world.
Do you think it's because they have smaller population?
I think that they made a decision to care for everybody. Right, the Finns have the best education system in the country. The Finnish kids test out higher at 4th, 8th, and 12th grade than everybody else in the world. Right, Singapore, number 2. Right, that comes from a decision to invest in their education. Right, their teachers are fully funded throughout their lifetime for lifelong learning. Right, so when you have national happiness, when you have meaningful entrepreneurship, when you have great education, and you still are dark 6 months of the year, something's going on there that is worth examining.
Now, do you think that has any?
Get 30 seconds on that, and I want to respect your guys' time because we've been at it a while, and I've got a question that I would love to chat about real quick. So go ahead.
So do you think? And again, I've been talking about culture, right? So in a lot of those countries, they are the same race, the same religion, the same cultural beliefs. So do you think what factor do you think that plays into it versus like we are a melting pot in America and that's a great thing, but then you can divide anybody on anything.
Right.
You and your wife, I'm sure maybe she likes a TV show and you hate it and vice versa.
Right.
But you agreed to get married and live together and agree on 99% of everything else. But there's maybe something that you really
I wish 99%.
yeah.
No, but I mean I think one of the telling statistics is the Nordic countries have become less homogeneous.
I was just going to say.
They're more and more diverse every day, and they're making more and more of a commitment to these social structures.
Are they as diverse though as we are here?
No.
Right.
No. We are very, very diverse.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that submission though is it reveals that for that diversity can be a problem for some folks, right?
For sure.
Now, do you think forced diversity is okay?
I don't know what that means.
What that means is just like the government said you can't marry your wife, what if the government said you had to marry outside
Well,
of
they don't.
Yeah,
But
I'm just
I think the examples that I see, for example, are Harvard. 9,000 people apply every year who are qualified, who all had A's from first grade. Got 1,800 slots. How do you decide, right? When they decided on the basis of legacy, right? Your father went, so you get to go. No debate. When they decided on the basis of athleticism, when they wanted somebody who wanted to play Harvard basketball, and they brought them in, no debate. Right? Even when those people, George W. Bush, Ted Kennedy, weren't the highest performers, right? Zero debate. But after 339 years of slavery and 100 years of Jim Crow, when black people showed up, the whole machinery kicked in for debate, right? I just want to be consistent in those areas, right? If legacy is no debate, geographic diversity is no debate, athleticism is no debate, then countering some of these other historic forces ought to be a similar no debate, but it isn't. That's when the whole debate mechanism kicked in. Right?
Have you read the book Almost Black, written by an Indian man?
No.
But take a look at it. He applied to all the Ivy League schools as Indian and didn't get into any of them. Then he stole an identity of an African American, resubmitted everything with a different social security number and a different name, same application. He got into all the Ivy League schools with the same exact transcripts and application. All he did was change his race. He wrote a book called Almost Black. And now he decided to not go through with it because he didn't want to live his life stolen identity in medical school. You know, he's not going to be practice medicine as a different person. It's just going to complicate your life. So he never went through with it. But that's an very interesting read. And have you ever read the book Freakonomics or heard of Freakonomics?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, the power of names and, you know, social structure and things of that nature, and paying homage to heritage, but at the same time understanding how certain people might view certain things. And Steve, you mentioned there was a question you had for us.
Well, yeah, like I said, I know we don't. I'm here all night, but I know you guys have some other place to go. So I want to just back up and revisit a little bit. I loved your simple analogy about interdependence, and you know, and I think you kind of. Please correct me if any of my generalizations here are wrong. But just from what I know of you, Justin, you kind of embody this rugged individualist kind of idea that is, you know, very, it's a strong tradition in our culture, in our country.
Yeah, my family's been here since 1638.
Right. And you're pretty, I mean, from our other conversations, you're pretty ready to be self-sufficient. And
Yeah,
I kind of want to get to this interdependence, and in that, how would you respond to Mel's thoughts about how should, I'm going to kind of pose two questions. One to Justin, how should the most vulnerable be cared for? That's to you. And Mel, I'm wondering, I think part of the divide is the picture that you're painting is literally beautiful. Like, yes, everybody is, no one's left behind and the most vulnerable are cared for. The pushback that I often hear and sometimes myself feel is, yeah, but we're just paying out all kinds of money to people that don't need it, they're abusing it, you know? So I'm wondering, how do we achieve caring for the most vulnerable without, in your words, a whole bunch of waste, fraud, and abuse? I don't know who wants to go first, but this is where I think, this is where I'm at in the divide.
When, you know, you brought a good point of the dependence and interdependence and the buckets and trying to reframe that language, and I agree with everything that you're saying there. So, you know, what do we do? I mean, I personally, if I think you should remove all money from politics. I don't think a politician should make $1. I think money motivates people to maybe vote a certain way, do a certain thing, maybe not, maybe they get in and they're, you know, the wholesome and good, then the system wraps them up and you have to, you know, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to vote this way, you know, like, think of like a House of Cards where Kevin Spacey's the minority whip and he whips up votes, you know, and things of that nature. And, you know, instead of like trying to actually solve the problem, you know, it's like, well, I got this bill passed, you got that bill passed, and you're going to have to sponsor this bill, and then I'll compromise with you on this bill.
And nobody is necessarily helped in the process.
And nobody gets
Right.
helped. Like,
Right.
So I've actually been working on some state legislation for about 10 years. It's bipartisan that, basically, when you get into a car accident, let's say you're insured in Maryland and you get in a car accident in Florida, okay? Is that not interstate? Shouldn't that a federal law apply there? Mm-hmm. However, if your car is in Maryland, it's going to be fixed under Florida law, even though it's insured and registered in Maryland, which has different laws. So your insurance policy is going to, because it's in Maryland, it's going to, if it gets repaired in Florida, it's going to have Florida law apply to it, even though I chose to live in Maryland. I chose to insure in Maryland under Maryland's laws, and they're different. Every state is different. All 50 states are different, and that's part of the beauty of America, the freedom to, maybe you don't like Maryland, you move to Florida. Maybe you don't like Florida, you move to Maryland, vice versa. Texas, California, doesn't matter. So I think that is something that is being lost, is the ability to go from town to town or state to state and have the ability to pick and choose how big of government you want. Like Montgomery County is a very big government, in terms of budgeting and personnel versus Carroll County, and they have a much bigger population. But then, look at state of New York versus the state of Montana, population and things of that nature. So you just have to, COVID, for example, like when they shut certain states down, certain counties down, that was government. Government was hurting people in that case, in my opinion. Even we now know that. In the beginning, we didn't necessarily know that. But, I had 4 tenants, commercial tenants, file bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. And the government was trying to help them, but it ended up costing them everything because they couldn't open their business.
So caring, though, for the most vulnerable. I mean, obviously, you have a generous heart. You started a nonprofit because you can't just give a bunch of money under, how you'd like to. I'm just like, what you mentioned, politicians not making any money, not being paid. Okay, I could see that could solve some problems. I don't know that would help. Let's just take the homeless people right now walking on Main Street, Westminster. How are those people that, kind of back to your initial story at Towson with take a few steps forward, take a few steps back, those guys and women would be taking steps back because they didn't have the benefits, we maybe call it privilege, that others, that maybe you and I have.
Like you were saying, it sounds good, it sounds perfect. Life's not perfect, life's not fair, never was, never will be, never is. I'm 5'6". You're how tall?
Just tall enough to not be able to shop at the mall.
Okay. So you were able to live your athletic dream and play, scholarship. I believe if I was a foot taller, I probably could have played Division I football. But because I'm 5'6", I played Division III football. Now, what's the impact on that of your life? Well, I think if I would have went to Alabama, maybe not Alabama, Maryland, you'd have a bigger alumni connections for future business than I would have from Susquehanna, which is a smaller school with a smaller alumni basis. So because I'm 5'6", life's not fair, that prevented me from going to what I thought I was going to do for college football and college track and field and shot put. So that's something that nobody can. I guess, all right, so why doesn't the NFL, should I sue the NFL for height discrimination because there's not a single 5'6" lineman in the NFL? So to me, that's like, at what point do you stop trying to tip the scale? I don't know the answer to that, so that's just my view, because that's not fair. My dream was to play in the NFL. I can't because I'm not big enough. So
your thoughts on that, and then subsequent to that, how do we avoid waste, fraud, and abuse that so many on the right are enraged about?
So I kind of have a flat argument to this, and I'll come back to Scotland. I went over to Scotland to look at the family flat we were going to live in before I brought my family over.
Okay.
And 2 things happened that night, that weekend, that have stayed with me forever. One was I ordered Chinese food, and the dude who was Chinese who brought me the food had a Scottish accent. And that was crazy.
That's wild.
It tripped me out. And the second thing was a BBC Scotland news report on the television in the room that showed that they had a commitment across the nation to 0% sleeping rough. Sleeping rough is homelessness, right? And so, again, I don't think there are more competent people there than here. I don't think there are more empathetic people there than here. I think there's the power of a decision. It's really that simple.
Don't you think empathy drives those decisions, though?
Maybe, but I think, like I said, we have empathic people here.
Yeah.
We just have not made the decision that there will be no homelessness, right? Once we decided that there would be an interstate highway system, there was. Right? Once we made the decision that we were going to go to the moon, we did. right? Once we made a decision.
There's a bit of a divide there, but yeah.
No, there,
I want to cover this. We're not going there right now.
but my point is that there's a power in just deciding as a nation
understand. Yeah.
what's right, moral, and just, right? And we have not decided. That's why we have it. Is because we have not decided that we
So what, you think we
care
could-
about that.
what we
Real
could
quick,
decide?
the second
Okay,
point
sorry, go ahead.
is, I remember being the statewide VP of Programs and Network Relations for Maryland Food Bank. And one of the phenomena at any food distribution that I thought was super interesting to me was how some people who had spent their whole adult lives volunteering to support these food distributions spent so much time policing who was in the line, right? There is this streak in us in America that you can't get something that, you better not be getting something you're not supposed to get, right? We spend a lot of time on that. And I spent a lot of time during my time at Maryland Food Bank telling those people, don't worry about that. If there's a food distribution at 10 o'clock and someone gets in line at 4 o'clock in the morning and they're wearing a fur coat, they still need food.
Because they're standing there.
They're standing there, right? This is not a rich person who's going,
Sure.
let me just get one more box of government cheese,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So you don't have to police that. And for me, if we err on the side of waste to make sure that everybody's taken care of, I'm a lot more comfortable with doing that than I am erring on the side of waste in what's, the tools to kill people and break things on the military side, right? Which is
Oh,
what we do, right? We
okay.
flood the Pentagon with resources more than they asked for in the last 7 budgetary cycles. They've asked for X, but Democrats and Republicans have come together as 2 political factions each and every time to give them more than they've asked
They
for.
just increased it with the big beautiful bill.
Right.
Spending for defense.
And they can't pass an audit,
Yeah.
right? But we're worried about vulnerable people over here. Maybe they get too much, right? That seems a little bit of a misplacement of our ethos. How about just take care of people? And that type of stuff tends to work itself out, particularly, like I said, when you see young people and families wrapped with resources, they tend to flourish. It's very seldom that somebody gets wrapped with resources and they sit back and go,
Squander.
now I'm going to do nothing. I don't really have those stories, and I worked my whole life in the city amongst vulnerable people.
Really?
So I don't really have those stories.
Now, when you mention if we want to end homelessness,
Yeah.
so what would that home look like? Who's going to maintain that home? The person living there, if it's given to them for free. Who's going to do the maintenance and all those things? Because you own a home, correct, yourself?
I live in a home.
Okay.
I live in a multi-generational home.
Okay.
Yeah. I've owned several homes.
Okay. So you've probably done some own work on your properties in the past and maintained them. Okay. So then the next step is who's going to maintain that? So then what's the square footage of that house? How many bedrooms does it have? What are the amenities? Does it have TVs that come with it, or do you have to buy your own TV? Obviously, it needs high-speed internet for educational purposes and things of that nature. Obviously sanitary reasons, plumbing and heat and HVAC and things like that. Good electric, it's safe. So, what would and like I said, we've never sat down and costed that out. What to eradicate homeless, this is what we're going to build, and this will do it. So then my question would be 25 years from now, okay? So do people ever not stay in that housing unit? Like, do they have kids in it, and then kids in it, and kids in it, and then now we're 50 years later, and it's multi-generational of they never changed? So, what is the true cost of that? And I don't think you can actually figure that out because of people's decisions they have to make themselves. So, I agree that if we wanted to end homelessness, we could. But again, I think it, for political reasons, it allows us to stay divided. For politicians, it could be like, I'm going to cut funding, vote for me. I'm going to increase funding, vote for me. And then, it just keeps going back and forth. So, like you said, Sweden or Scotland, made a decision, this is what we're going to do. So if America made that decision, this is what we're going to do, then we'd have to make that decision and do it. So I just don't see that, given our current structure, how that's even a possibility, which is sad, but I just don't see how we could ever come to terms like that, like the left and the right. Now, we the people could vote in people that want to do that over time, but the way the current structure is, it's really hard to get incumbents out because of the money required to win an election.
Yeah, you've come back to that point a few times, and you know, I started a 527 called Permanent Platform.
Okay.
That was really about forgetting public personalities and forgetting political parties, but committing to a bare minimum platform, right? And then the question becomes, when you're talking to people who want to run for an office where you have a vote, what's your commitment to the platform, right? And this platform was about really fundamental things that we don't have, right? Since 2000, we've put in $100 trillion in federal revenue, right?
Into what?
In taxation and,
Okay.
and revenue into the government.
Okay.
100 trillion. Half of all the money that's ever gone in has gone in between 2020 and now, right? And since 1789, half the money has gone in between.
Since 1789.
Yeah, half the money if you take from 1789 to now, half the money we've ever put in was put in between 2000 and 2020, right? $100 trillion we've put in, and we don't have clean water at the tap. None of us do. We all have forever chemicals in our water at the tap. We don't have clean air. You can go right now and look at the places where we have what's called PM 2.5 or particulate matter 2.5 or higher, places in this country to breathe. We don't have clean food, right, which is a whole other discussion that we started earlier. And we don't have clean housing. We got housing full of lead, full of mold. Like, we haven't done, so what did we get for the $100 trillion?
Right.
Regime change in multiple countries across the world through military. That's
Right?
what
So
we
you
got.
and I are kind of similar on
Yeah.
some of that.
Yeah.
I want a permanent platform that delivers those fundamentals, right? Because I do think it's the power of a decision, and you got a lot of moonshots that can generate a lot of economics there, right?
So when are you running for president? I mean, I agree with the platform
You know,
as a
and
baseline.
it's just it's clean air, clean water, clean food, clean housing, right?
Who doesn't want clean air, clean food, clean water?
Right,
I mean,
but a lot of people don't yet. We're in an era of misinformation and disinformation and a lot of propaganda, and I think there are other things that are also as important, right? I talk a lot about limelight, right? So lime is this this manifesto approach to local government. I call it "look in my eye," right? I think we're much better off when we go to the town hall together, look in each other's eyes, and start talking to town councils and mayors about policy, and show up to the commissioners' meetings and look in their eyes, right?
Well, and I think
Than
that's
we do
where
talking online.
yeah, we lost the humanity through a phone or through,
And it doesn't get it done, right? The passion there doesn't get it done.
like with the fact that we're in person here, that it's a better environment to have these conversations
Yeah.
than if we were doing a Zoom meeting.
Yep.
You're not going to
That's
feel.
why we're not doing Zoom.
You're not gonna. It's not gonna be as good.
No.
It's not gonna be as real, as authentic.
And all that stuff we grew up with, where 85% of communication is body language, you can't see that.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I'll keep going. You guys,
So
the light part. You said there's lime light.
Yeah, so lime is look in
in
my
my
eye, local politics, and light is a proposal I have that's essentially line item taxation express.
Hello.
Right?
Yes.
I'd love for there to be a baseline. I'd love for half my taxes, at the federal level in particular, but across the board, to be a certain percentage distribution that's determined by Congress. And then the other half, God bless you, the other half, I decide where it goes,
Yeah. Okay.
right? So
That's not what I thought you were gonna say, but I got you. I got you.
if they say, hey, here's this formula for half your taxes, and it's going to go to the military, it's going to go to this, it's going to go to that. That's great. Now the other 50%, maybe I want to give it all to education, right?
Because this is what you care about.
Because that's what I care about.
And I kind of completely agree with that, 'cause that's kind of my concept of lower taxes, and let me make the investments in the community that that are near and dear to me. So things that we do is we also give cars away to veterans and things of that nature. But the more I have to, if I have to pay more taxes, then I can give less cars away. you know.
Yeah, I think you would take it further than I would in that you'd probably have most of it be that and very little of it be taxes.
Probably 80-20.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far because
Yeah.
But your
I'm a
ideas
black
could be
male in
different.
this country. I know, I feel like I know what it's like to be vulnerable, right? Like, you know, I come to the corner here at Malcolm Drive, and there's a guy and his son leaning out the window looking at me, and they fake a gunshot, and they drive away, right? I'm at the corner,
Was this recently or?
this was maybe 9 years ago.
Okay.
Very recently, and I wrote about this on my Substack, I was at not the four-way intersection by McDaniel College, but down one, so by 31. And I was making the left, Uniontown and New Windsor. And I was getting ready to make the left, and a guy pulled up next to me. This was 2 months ago. Guy pulls up next to me, and there's kids across the way. It looks like they're getting ready to cross. And he's leaning out the car saying something to them. And I got my windows up. I can't hear. But I'm listening, and then he looks at me for a second, something, and he's trying to talk to me, so I roll my window down. And he goes, "Hey, kids, this is an N-word. This is an N-word." And the light changes, and he drives away,
Wow.
right? So these things exist, right? These things happen. I had a whole incident where the police had to be called at Safeway, where somebody was coming in, and they were screaming the N-word, and so...
People suck.
And you know,
See, that's why I think you should be able to just like punch people in the face, and
we can finish on that.
Yeah, like we need to bring back
No, but I just say that to say
Yeah.
that, we are in a nation that has a history, right? And that history doesn't disappear because of laws, but people have recourse.
Man,
because of government.
I don't know. I'm so sorry that happened. And I
appreciate
one of my I heard stories like that from one of my best friends who went to Liberty High School, in, just a couple towns over, African American guy. But this was in the '90s, and it was like it was told whatever you do, don't drive through Gamber, because that was like KKK headquarters and such. But I thought we'd really, and I guess we have moved, but it's just. That's unbelievable.
there's always going to be.
I know there's
bad
assholes and
eggs.
idiots everywhere, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And I don't think I use that to think about all kinds of vulnerability, right? We all have a nickel in the privilege quarter, right? When we had our kids and we had strollers, I began to understand what it meant to be in a wheelchair and try and get on the metro, right? Or try to get on a bus. Right, I didn't have to think. I had the privilege. The privilege really is being able to be stone cold ignorant to somebody else's truth, right? And so I was able to walk around able-bodied. Didn't have to think about what it meant to be in those situations, right? I didn't have to think about what it meant to be gay or lesbian or transsexual or bi. I don't have to think about those things. But at some point, I might be vulnerable, right? And I'd like a nation that, one, to your point, sort of begins with an ethos and a value set that tries not to have people vulnerable, but there are bad actors.
Yeah.
And so we need a framework that's going to speak to that, right? And so I'm always trying to think about, in any situation, who's made or kept vulnerable, right? Who's harmed, right? And if we can do some of that, I think we can get at a lot of the things that we've talked about today.
Steve, do you have any final questions or wrap-ups?
I just want to say thank you both so much, and I hope we could do a part 2 one day because this was fantastic. I will ask just one real quick question that I'm just curious about. Does faith play a role in either one of your kind of come-froms, your background on how where you are today, or not so much?
When I was younger, we used to go to church every Sunday. Everybody in Carroll County did.
Sure.
Basically until corporate America came here
Okay.
and opened up on
Gotcha.
Sundays. Then my grandparents died 6 weeks apart when I was 11.
Jeez.
And a cancer in a car accident. So then my mom was mad with God, so we stopped going to church.
Okay.
So then, I didn't attend church or anything of that. I always had faith, but I didn't do organized religion. And me personally, I don't necessarily think you need true organized religion involving massive amounts of money.
Right.
We can read the book in and it doesn't matter what book you want to read, whatever book's important to you, that's Beauty of America, Religious Freedom, whatever, everybody can have their own faith or not have faith. So for me, I do have my own, personal relationship with my God, and that's my faith, and that's what I believe in. And if you believe in something different, great. If you believe in something different, great. That's the beauty of religious freedom.
Yeah, I was raised in the AME church,
Okay.
the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and we raised our kids. And my wife is the daughter of a pastor, a Lutheran pastor, who pastored at Holy Trinity and Grace Lutheran here in Westminster.
Oh, wow.
We raise our kids really to think more about divine principle.
Okay.
Right. So when I talk to them about it, and when I think about it myself, I think about is it important for us to really spend a lot of time on Deuteronomy 17? No. But, I was raised with Christ as the Godhead, and he gave greatest commands, right?
Okay.
Which meant that other stuff isn't as important.
Okay.
Right. And the greatest commands are love God, love the universe, love the uncaused cause, and love your neighbor as yourself. Right. And when he was asked explicitly about what neighbor meant, and he told the parable of the Good Samaritan, which is anybody for whom you can exhibit merciful, loving kindness.
And that
Palestinian
that
babies,
Carroll
County babies.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
All right.
So, yeah, that drives everything I do.
All right. Thank you both so much, and I hope we can do this again.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, hey, thanks for watching Inside the Divide or listening or whatever you did. Appreciate you logging in. As always, though, none of this would be possible without the amazing behind-the-scenes tech guys. Here we've got
Travis, the director.
The director, he's pushing all those buttons there. And this is
Kelly. I was fact checking.
Did a great job. Did a great job. So thank you both. And please let us know what you think of the show. And if you have any thoughts for any future topics, or maybe you'd like to be a guest, drop us a line, InsideTheDividePodcast.com. You'll find us on YouTube and everywhere podcasts are heard. Have a good one.